Hello, and welcome to Intentional Conversations podcast. I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. And we are celebrating our 5th year anniversary for Intentional Conversations podcast. We are yay 5, and that's really exciting for us. And so we're finding moments all throughout the year to be able to celebrate this milestone. And we're so glad you're here with us. Please go to the chat. Let us know where you are joining the conversation from. It is always a treat for us to be able to see the many different geographies that are represented, not only in the US, but also those that join us from outside of the US. That's incredibly exciting to us. So let us know in the chat. I want to give a special shout out to those who are joining us via LinkedIn Live. We know that that's part of our community as well. Sometimes people don't register via Zoom to get the ability to actually join us in that Zoom community, but rather you will join us while you are watching and scrolling through LinkedIn. Nonetheless, we're glad you're here in whatever capacity, and we do appreciate you being a part of our community. At NWC, we truly value disability inclusion, and as such, we have enabled closed caption feature for those that will find that valuable for enhancing your experience. Just know that's available for you. I do encourage you to leverage the chat as a way to get proximate to each other in this virtual learning environment as we learn with and from each other. Share resources, share articles, share sentiments, expressions of what you're hearing and experiencing today. We do value that. And if you wish to be connected to this community beyond this hour of time, then drop your LinkedIn to the chat. My team will drop my LinkedIn. I value the opportunity to be connected with as many of you as possible. Perhaps we aren't already connected on LinkedIn, and that's just another way we can stay in touch with each other. But I am super glad that you are here with us. Welcome again to Intentional Conversations podcast. Let the conversations begin. There we go. So if you're just tuning in, once again, welcome to Intentional Conversations podcast. I have a great show that's lined up for you today. I cannot wait to introduce you formally to today's guest co-host. But if you've been with us for quite some time, you know that I like to take a moment to share some things that are important for you to know. So here at NWC, we really do value ensuring that our community is aware of some national observances. And since we are still in the month of June, although at the end, June is Pride Month. And so, as I've been sharing with you all month long, let's make sure that we take some time to stand in solidarity with members of the LGBTQIA community and to recognize their contributions to society and to just be a resource as best as we can. We know that that community is one that often is marginalized and has to navigate lots of inequities. And we want to make sure that we're showing our support, not just in the month of June. June's going to be going away shortly. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping this top of mind all throughout the year. One of the things that I love to do here as part of our podcast community is to share with you some of the offerings that NWC has available. And we are really big and excited about our communities of practice that are underway right now. We have many organizations that we are supporting with COPs, and we have 4 in particular that we have been highlighting and making available. The first is the emotionally regulated leader. I will tell you that ER has changed my life, so much so to where I have embedded emotional regulation and embodiment through all of the work that I do here at NWC. And I've even created a community of practice specifically for that topic. We also have storytelling for connection, for change, for inclusion. I'm a big fan of storytelling. Stories connect us. Stories are a way to get us proximate to lived experiences of others that we may not ever encounter, and just really a great way to strengthen connectivity and collaboration and empathy and compassion. So if that sounds like something that your organization would gain value from, let us know. We want to hear from you and have a discovery conversation to explore further partnering on this. And then the future-proof leader. We can never have enough conversations on how do we future-proof ourselves to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success during this very volatile time when there's lots of ambiguity, uncertainty, And so I want you to make sure that your leaders are prepared in your organization to lead those that fall under their report and to set the standard and the tone for how to navigate this with grace and to navigate it well. Because, yeah, we are in some tough times right now. And then last but not least, Boundless, which happens to be one of the communities of practice that's most near and dear to my heart. Specifically, it's all about women, women's empowerment, women's well-being, women's leadership. And we are very excited to make sure that women are finding their rightful place within corporate, within all spaces and places, in fact, and that they are feeling well supported through community, which is what Boundless is all about. So I hope that you will reach out. And if these topics are not of interest, maybe because you already have something in your organization that's addressing these areas of concern, then we can custom curate a learning experience and a community of practice that tailor fits your organization and your learning needs. Now, you heard me mention Boundless, and that is very near and dear to my heart. It is because right now we are recruiting and taking registrations for our Boundless Woman of Color community. Again, it's based on well-being, empowerment, and leadership. And we want you all to just be fully aware of the wonderful opportunities that we have to bring this full circle to women who are navigating some hard spaces right now, particularly women of color and specifically Black women. And so if this sounds of interest to you, then scan that QR code, get more information about it, and we'd love to be in conversation with you. Okay, storytelling culture framework. You heard me talk about storytelling. What I didn't share with you is that storytelling is not new. We share personal narratives all the time, right? But what I'm finding is that organizations are not being intentional as they should be to embed storytelling culture into all areas of operation. I think it's a game-changing distinction from those organizations who are really building great synergy and cohesion, and I want that for your organization. We have a phenomenal methodology that we're taking organizations through to help build storytelling into their cultural framework. I'd love to be in conversation with you about it and see how this can be game-changing for your organization. Now, I want you to know that there will be no IC on July 4th in observance of Independence Day. We will return for our first Intentional Conversation podcast of July on the 11th. So mark your calendars. If you show up here, we won't be here, but we do look forward to seeing you the week after. Now, it does me great pleasure to take the opportunity to formally introduce today's guest co-host. And if you've been with me for quite some time, you know that the way I like to do this is to read the formal bio of the individual. Why do I do this? Because I think it's so important for our podcast community to know the accolades, credentials, and experience that our guest co-host shows up to the conversation with. And so that is why I read the formal bio. So momentarily, you'll have a chance to hear from today's guest co-host, Dr. Carleen Carey. Well, let me give you her formal introduction. Dr. Carleen Carey is a public educator with over 15 years of experience across K-12 and higher education sectors. Before founding Acoma Leadership Consulting, she served as Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Director of Public Outreach and Equity, College and Career Readiness Manager, and Instructor of Record for government, nonprofit, and higher education organizations. In these roles, she led a portfolio of programs, including Hidden Histories, EEOC Training Corner, Women's Leadership Launch, and Community Coalition. In the K-12 sector, Dr. Carey led the transition to remote education for career and technical education teachers through professional workshops such as Race and Ability in the CTE classroom, tech tune-ups for CTE teachers, and digital download, connecting students with careers. She also taught human diversity, power, and opportunity in the teacher certification program at Michigan State University. Dr. Carey currently teaches African American authors from 1700 to 1900, African American authors from 1900 to present day, and early American literature at the University of Maryland Global Campus. In her free time, she enjoys quilting, raising chickens, and making jam. I cannot wait to hear more about that. So you know what to do now, podcast community. find those words of affirmation, those reactions, those emojis, and I want you to place into the chat just a warm welcome. I am going to bring our guest co-host into the spotlight so that we can hear from her. But before I release you, Dr. Carey, to share with our community, whatever way that you feel appropriate to let them know a little bit more about you, I will share that we have a tradition here. And that tradition is that we ask our guest co-host to consider sharing something with us that we would not know from hearing your bio, which we've just done, right? Or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. And we already know that you enjoy quilting, raising chickens, and making jam. So you got to find something else for us. Welcome, my friend. So glad you're here today.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the only thing that isn't out there is that I enjoy collecting antique sewing machines.
Ooh, I
You'll
like it.
always,
So that kind of goes along with quilting. Okay, I can see the connection there.
you'll always
Hmm.
find me at the thrift store, and definitely in any sort of a secondhand used shop. I have stumbled upon some amazing, amazing sewing machines, as well as just running into different kind of sewing doodads and fabric finds that you would never expect. So I'm a treasure hunter of sorts.
I love that. I love that. I can see the connection to quilting. So I'm curious though, do you just collect them and kind of display them, or do you actually try to restore them and use them?
Restore and use. I'm
Okay.
one of those people who likes to have things around me that bring me joy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really, really great about old sewing machines, like sewing machines have not changed very much in 100 years. So like you have a nice old machine, which was not programmed for like obsolescence or for you to be able to purchase another one in 2 years. This thing is heavy. I think the most it's ever cost me to upgrade a sewing machine is $200. Now, strangely enough, most of the stores that repair your vacuum cleaners will also repair sewing machines. I guess the parts are similar. I've never figured out why, but there's a sewing and
Interesting.
yeah, isn't that weird? It's odd.
That is so interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I would have ever guessed. Let me call up the folks who clean the vacuum cleaner so that they can also fix my sewing machine. But I also don't sew. So that there you go. That tells you that much. Okay, that is so interesting. I love that. And I love that it's part of what brings you joy because let me tell you, Dr. Carleen, right now, I am crusading for find, seek as many opportunities that you can place into your daily habits that will bring us joy because there is so much going on right now.
Mhm,
Thinking
mhm.
about the stories of the deportations that are just heartbreaking. I'm also thinking about the war that we're at right now. It's just so much that's going on right now that it's feeling that we must be very radical about leaning into those moments of joy while we're also experiencing trauma in many ways. And so I love that for you. I love that for you. Okay. So we've heard about your background. I want you to just kind of give us a little bit about how did you get started into the work that you're doing? I mean, as an educator of all types of groups and sectors, you have really run the gamut from that discipline. What actually inspired you to get into education? Is this kind of a lineage in your family? So share kind of some background for us.
No, ma'am. I wish I could say it's a family lineage, but it's more of a cultural heritage because Black women have
Mm.
a legacy going back to Fannie Jackson Coppin.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got a legacy when it comes to being educators. So it's more of a community legacy than a familial one. Um,
Yeah.
for me, it was just, I always wanted to be a teacher growing up. I knew I was going to be an English teacher because I really loved the reading and writing. And so I was an English major before I knew what that was. And in
Okay.
fact, when I got to Williams, oh my God, I had completed, I think, 80% of the classes for my English major in by the time I was a sophomore. And
Yeah.
so my financial aid officer, Michelle, who has the same birthday as me, she was like, "You have to study abroad." And I was like, "No, no, I'm an English major." And she was like, "That doesn't mean
Staying
you
right
can
here.
study abroad," right? And I'm first generation. So I was like, "What is a study abroad? How does that work?" And she walked me through the process and the financial aid aspect of it, which was hugely important because a lot of us who are first generation are paying attention to what our family needs at the same time as we're
Yeah.
on campus, trying to figure out what's this degree about? How's it going to apply? How much money am I going to make when I finish this degree? All of those considerations. So a lot of the work that I've done in education started from being a really nerdy kid. I actually was super excited about books and reading more so than anything that was around me. I used to feel like, oh my gosh, if you would let me read for 8 hours a day, I would. And that would just be my definition of paradise. And it wasn't until I ran into other kids who were like, oh yeah, I prefer to read than talk to people. I was like, aha, okay. You got so
You
much-
are my people.
That's
I'm
right.
feeling seen. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. I love it. No, so you got it honest. You were always around kind of this learning nature. And so it kept continuing to follow you. So, within all of the roles that you've had, you've had some pretty influential roles. And so I'm curious, what role has stretched you the most as a leader? And what did you learn from the experience?
Oh my gosh. I would have to say there are two. So being a manager of college and career readiness at Baltimore City Schools was a learning experience in a lot of different
Mm,
ways. Um, at the time, I was responsible for managing the district's Perkins grant, which is a federally funded grant, comes from the Department of Education, and it's
mhm.
in technical education. I was managing the agriculture program, which was really fun for me because I come from Virginia, right outside of Fredericksburg. It's super rural. I spent my summers canning with my grandmas, and there's all these horse farms and cow pastures, all of think rural Virginia. But I was so surprised to find that here in the city. Baltimore City has a 34-acre farm. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that. 34 acre. Wow.
Yeah, the school district owns a huge farm that used to be, I believe, an orphanage for Negro children. It was one of the titles, and they were like, "Wow, do we see that
Wow.
anymore?" And I was like, "No, we don't really use that anymore." But it was a really great role because I got to meet so many parents and so many students who were excited about their students' futures and their opportunities. A lot of the work that I did with the agriculture program was working with folks from the State Department of Agriculture in terms of getting a letter from the State Secretary of Agriculture, working with folks on curriculum and getting certifications for students and things like agribusiness. I had really
Mm.
great experiences with principals around the 1890 scholarship. So many
Wow.
principals did not know that, like, wait a minute, if you have a kid in agriculture and they want to continue studying agriculture, the USDA will pay for them to go to school and they'll have the opportunity to join the federal workforce as well. So it's a
Mm.
great way for us first generation folks to figure out
Yeah.
how to do college. Um,
Yeah.
one of my families were super excited about that. I had a couple families that took advantage of the SMART Fellowship as well. And that's for the STEM and engineering kids. And
Wow.
we get a lot of mentorship through the Department of Defense and internships that, pay for their college and will pay all the way up to their PhD, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's really worth sharing because we could have some folks in our community that are connected with those who may find that as a pathway of interest. And so I'm curious, is this where maybe like the raising chickens kind of somehow connection came in?
Yes, definitely. My students were
Okay.
so surprised. One of the things people don't realize, and this is very important to this moment where we're experiencing several traumas concurrently, um,
Yes.
having animals with students and having students in green spaces is absolutely healing. Um,
Mm.
so in the agriculture program, we had students doing things like going to the National Aquarium and dissecting squid and then feeding it to dolphins and stuff like that. And for kids, dissections are hugely important because they're hands-on. They can start to see some of the things that they've learned in practice. And I think they really just love the idea of getting out of the classroom and having a real hands-on experience. For a lot of the students that I worked with, it was the aquarium and being able to see everybody,
Yeah.
like all these live animals and things like that, because kids do want to interact with the world around them, especially in an urban area like Baltimore. People forget that Baltimore has national parks in the county.
Yeah.
Waterfalls in Baltimore, y'all. We've got great hiking trails. Um, yeah, and as it relates to working with students whose families may be low income, a lot of the work that we do around helping them, build that pollinator garden, plant that pizza garden, looking after animals like chickens and bunnies and things like that is really good for regulating their emotions and helping them come from a calm, peaceful place. Like having a pet to talk to about all your woes apparently is very good.
I love this conversation. I really do. And I love the fact that you tossed in there, that that's also a way to regulate, emotions, because you heard my spill in the beginning. I'm real big on emotional regulation, and I've been immersing myself into that for quite some time now. It's finding its way into my work. But yes, I do think that there's something to be said for being one with nature, and how that in and of itself can be part of that healing process. It can be a part of just the drive to want to prioritize radical self-care, and so I love that you have directly through experience, you've seen that kind of play itself out. um, and I was one of those kids that I didn't spend a lot of time in nature, and I feel like maybe that impacted me because when I am in nature today, I do think that it's very serene, and it does something to your nervous system. And so I'm loving that you are seeing direct, benefits of that with the students that you've been able to kind of, work with. So when you think about your work in education and all that's happening right now with, the Department of Education, what comes to mind for you? What comes up to you?
A lot of conversations around how we're going to help students who need different supports and students with
Yeah.
different abilities to develop to their full potential. Because to tell you the truth, Dr. White, it's not just your nervous system that's improved by being in nature, it's actually your digestive system as well.
Oh,
When we're able to get students outside into nature, we're able to help them understand the relationships that are going on in our biological, ecological system. A lot of
yeah.
students get really excited about being outside more. And that's important
Mm,
because when we're looking at things like environmental racism, we know that low-income neighborhoods are hotter and have less
yeah.
shade than high income neighborhoods. And that has an impact on students' conditions like asthma in the summertime.
Right.
Some of the accommodations that I've thought, like in terms of being able to have accommodations for adapted PE for students with physical disabilities, um,
Yeah.
a different, they might be riding a bicycle or having different specialized equipment versus doing what the general education students are doing. There are a lot of questions that parents have had. I didn't realize that so many of my clients have students with IEPs and 504s. And
Mm,
just having conversations about things like, okay, we should do a training on cross-cultural communications for this legal nonprofit for their volunteer attorneys. Cool, exciting. And then behind the scenes, folks are like, well, what am I going to do about my kid's IEP? And I'm thinking to myself, that money has to come from federal budgets because so many states have a shortfall when it comes to being able to pay for special education teachers,
of
especially if
course.
you need a dedicated aide like a para in the classroom. So, and that's just for thinking on the level of one or two students. When we think about adapted curriculum for students with disabilities to learn to read, because they're going to have to read employment contracts, they're going to have to read their text messages these days and their emails, right? Those are district level purchases that very often run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And those are worthwhile because we all benefit from making sure that the most vulnerable members of our community have what they need to be successful and make a contribution that they're proud of. So there's been a lot of
100%.
conversation about that just from like the professional perspective as well as from the personal perspective, because for parents, even when COVID happened, so many
Right.
parents were trying to think, where do I find my resources? And a lot of folks were like, okay, well, this is the first time we've had teachers do pods of tutoring, and my student responded really well to that. Can we try that again? And what's it going to look like for Title IX? Like, just what is this going to look like for all of these federal programs to not be there? Especially because when I was running the Perkins grant at Baltimore City, I want to say we started out at like $2.4 million.
Mm,
And city schools at that point had about 82,000 students.
yeah.
And honestly, it was a real change even with that much money. So thinking about a reduction, it's it's
Yeah.
it's mind-boggling. I don't know how folks are going to
Yeah.
make the difference.
Yeah, I appreciate you breaking that down to really helping our community to understand the totality of the impact. Yeah, and we must amplify the notion of solving for those who are in the margins, for those who are in the margins. And so I it's disheartening, and we have to continue to maintain hope and continue to be creative and innovative in our approach to try to solve for it where we can. I know that a lot of places like community centers and churches and other places that can have the resources and the wherewithal to try to fill those voids. They're trying to, but it definitely does not replace, for the example that you just gave, the 2.4 million resource wise. And so we have to continue to keep pushing the dialogue around this. So I want to talk about some of the impactful programs that you have led and Hidden Histories and the EEOC Training Center. So, can you share? I love an origin story. So, can you share the origin story of maybe one or both of those initiatives and its community impact?
Sure. Hidden Histories actually came about when I was at America 250. This year is the 250th celebration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And so we have a lot of conversations around what does it mean to be free and who got free
Yeah,
when. And I think one of the things that really kept coming up in those conversations was that everybody knew a different piece of history. So the folks who
yeah,
were working on Indigenous and Native affairs really wanted to talk about what's the history of these treaties that are still not being fulfilled in 2025 or 2022 at that point.
yeah.
And why is it that most Americans don't know that the Native American community is alive and well today? We've got Deb Haaland, right, Secretary of the Interior.
Mhm.
We've also got poet laureate, um, and we've got so many Native American people who are blazing trails, breaking barriers, and really
Mhm.
the first of the first. And we're still having firsts all the way into, almost 300 years into the country's history. So a lot of the work that we did around hidden histories was helpful because our students are, our employees became students of history, and we're able to think about things like, okay, so what native land am I on? How would I do a land acknowledgement? How do I find,
Yeah.
yeah, how do I find out how to connect with the community that's here, that's local, and how do I support? Because powwows are very often open community affairs, like definitely bring some good coins and support because commerce is so much older than capitalism as humans
Mhm.
been for hundreds of thousands of years. And powwows are very welcoming. And I think for a lot of people, not knowing that, powwow season is typically September, August, that's when everybody's getting together,
Yeah.
being able to have that information is helpful because it helps you to integrate into your community locally. And it helps you to start asking questions like, okay, so when are we going to have someone come in and talk about Native American history? So for a lot of the folks that did the Hidden Histories programs and really liked them, we had a variety of speakers, folks from the Smithsonian, folks from my own Williams College who have copies of the Declaration of Independence and really thinking about what it means to do myth busting around the founding of the country, and really having those conversations around who's free today and who's not.
Absolutely. And I want to commend you for leading such an important initiative because, we realize that right now the history is not being taught the way that it should. And they are certainly histories of people who look like you and I that are not finding its way into the education system. And it's shameful. That's the best word I can think of right now. It's shameful. And so I appreciate even the titling and labeling of hidden histories because just because we're not talking about it doesn't mean it didn't happen, right? We're just not willing to confront it. But that's really important. So I love the name of it. And you mentioned a couple things I just want to kind of lift out of the conversation. The first is I always find it irony when we hear about the first, right? The first, of whatever kind of community that's on the margin, right? To trailblaze in a particular space or whatever the case may be. But in some ways, you really want to celebrate because you're like, okay, we've reached a significant milestone. But then you're like, why are we celebrating that at this point in time? We're talking about the first. And so it's always a little tricky for me. I have to be honest, it is. Um, but I appreciate when there is intentionality around preserving the history and telling those truths in a way that allows us to really fully understand the history, not just portions that we're proud of or that we want to confront because we feel like it's more important or more valuable, but all of it is valuable. And reckoning with that is really critical. I'll share, Dr. Carey, that we just celebrated Juneteenth, and I was fortunate to be a keynote speaker for BMW manufacturing plant in the upstate of South Carolina's Juneteenth program, and I told the story through this narrative of Opal Lee. And I talked about, what happened in Galveston, Texas, and you would not believe how many Black people approach me to say, I had no idea. I didn't know that that was the history. And so I bring that to the fore because we don't know what we don't know. And there was no judgment, no shame on those individuals' parts. They probably just were never taught it, obviously. And so I think it's important for us to have all these spaces and avenues to resourcefully get the word out of the hidden history that is not being told the way that it needs to. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing in that regard. How did you celebrate and acknowledge Juneteenth?
Where do you go? I took it down to Durham to the Kindred Spirits Convergence of African American Quilters, baby.
I love it.
Did a
I knew
little,
you had something awesome to share.
oh, yeah. Did a little community garden with the NAACP, did some
Awesome.
harvesting. But I do want to touch because that really resonated with me. So many people are interested in learning more about Native American history and about the multiple lenses that we can
Right.
look at American history through. I think in America 250, our communications team did a survey of our audience, and the historical aspects of the commemoration was the most important was the most important topic for people to know about.
Hmm.
A lot of folks get the sense of like, okay, I know that my family kind of immigrated here, but legal immigration didn't start until 1925. And
Right.
the community can tell you why that was. Okay.
Right.
There's some history there that has to be unpacked.
Oh,
A lot of people are thinking about their own family's origin story. For me, it was a really interesting experience to have hidden histories because my father is Carl Carey from Westmoreland, Virginia. Westmoreland is also known as the childhood home of George Washington. Now, I didn't know this till the Smithsonian historians brought it to my attention, but one of
okay.
the people who was enslaved by George Washington was a man named John Carey from Westmoreland, Virginia, right? And he was written about by both John Hancock, John Adams, and John Adams' son, because he was supposed to inherit Washington's military museum, his military outfit, and his costumes, something like a jacket and things like this, and boots.
Yeah.
And so they're writing correspondence to try and figure out how are we going to get this kind of inheritance to John Carey. And I'm thinking to myself, I have been teaching American history for how many years? I've been
And
teaching
you did not know
for
that.
how many years? I've never thought to think about it from the perspective of who were the people enslaved by George Washington, and why is my family still in the same county? Why didn't we run somewhere?
Fascinating. Yes, fascinating. And I would imagine that there's so many of those stories, right? That can be told that, people are just now coming into knowledge of some of the ways in which their family may have been like directly kind of impacted and right in the center of a lot of what we just often read about now, if we're lucky enough and it's not hidden, right?
And it's
But
not called a
that is,
working camp. A working
yes,
camp?
yes, 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 yes. No, really, 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 really interesting. Okay, so I want to talk about now this remote education that you had to make the shift to. So, someone who led the shift to remote education for CTE teachers during the pandemic, what inequities did that transition reveal, and how did you address them?
Oh my goodness. That I think COVID took me by surprise because at the time, Baltimore City schools had been cited for an EEOC violation because students with disabilities were not allowed into the CTE program.
Oh,
And because my background was in teacher education, the responsibility fell to me to design a teacher training program so that teachers can understand what's a 504, an IEP, what's a BIP, when there's an IEP meeting, how do I prepare, what's going to happen,
right.
and how do I modify my lesson plan, and what I'm asking students to do so that every student is able to be successful.
Mhm.
I was already in the middle of that work and talking to a lot of teachers in post-secondary transitions, talking to folks at Maryland Doors, and really kind of building the ecosystem and making sure there's a clear communication channel from our city schools teachers to understand that our special education students can be in school until 22. And then we help them to find work or vocational training out once they've graduated as well with the help of the state agencies. So I was involved in all of that when COVID just came and was like, and so all the
I'm
kids
here.
are home, teachers are staying home. I mean, I would like to say that the transition revealed some inequities in just equipment, but it also revealed a lot of inequities in terms of how students are able to get access to text, how students are able to navigate the digital world, and
Yeah.
really think about how do we make sure that the software that we're giving students is accessible for every student? Because one of the challenging parts about working with underfunded schools is that there isn't often enough resources to test every child who needs to be tested. So we have
Mhm.
students with learning disabilities that are discovered in high school. And they've been thinking school is a terrible place. I hate this. This is not for me. Not because of anything that's inherent to them, but because the environment had too many barriers to accessing the support that families couldn't access. So let's talk about family diversity in Baltimore City. Huge history of Black culture, Jewish culture. People forget that Baltimore is a hotbed of immigration from lots of places. Students
Mhm.
from Nigeria, students from China, students from Egypt, students
Mhm.
Panama, everywhere you can think of. It is a really rich, rich base of people. Um, and so you have families who are used to a different education system who are suddenly have to get used to American education. And how do we do remote instruction? Now let's get to the teachers. Because that's two and two, well, that's three right there. But the teachers themselves, many of the teachers in city schools are super excited about new technologies that make things easier. So I think one of my most favorite workshops to do with teachers was the tech tune-up. So if you're giving kids their quizzes, self-graded quizzes.
Self-graded quizzes. Love it.
Yeah, once we were
Yeah.
able to establish that the technology is going to help for a lot of teachers, they were like, oh, wait a minute, I can get the students to make a slide while we're online and that can be their group work. Yeah, as long as we can demonstrate that our learning objectives have been achieved, that's what it is. And so a lot of the fun stuff that we got to do was thinking from the perspective of what's going to make this easier for teachers, what's going to keep it fun, because I think they got cahooted to death at one point. But really the software and the programs that the teachers really enjoyed were the ones that helped them to save time,
Yeah.
ones that really help them to figure out, okay, which of these students is struggling? How do I support them? And what resources do we need? Because a lot of students weren't accessing the classroom from a laptop. They were accessing it from a cell phone because students have,
Yeah.
and that makes things difficult if you have a class board and everybody's supposed to put their sticky and their ideas on. So really thinking about, disparities in how the teachers have been trained around technology. How do we think about families who are immigrants and first generation Americans? How do we think about even just resources that we have for helping students to have a rich print environment? You know, where are they going to find something to read? How do we give them choices about what to read? Because we know that everybody likes to have choices about what to read. That helps the reader.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting that you are, sharing this insight from the context of youth and schools. But someone who works with a lot of adults within corporations and the workforce, right? I mean, organizations were just as equally challenged, by the inequities that they found themselves being faced with after the pandemic. And so, as you were talking about technology and some of the ways that the teachers were able to save time and found value in it, it just leads me to this conversation of AI, because I do a lot of work around ethical and responsible use of AI. And yes, I can tell you have a lot to say about it. So I'm just gonna let you go. I'm not even gonna ask my question. Just share what's coming up for you.
I think I have let many of my thoughts around AI be shaped by two ladies, Timnit Gebru, who used to work at Google, and she runs an AI research firm as well, and Ruha Benjamin.
Yes.
So these ladies are amazing to me because it's like understanding how you're thinking and how technology can help you to think is incredibly important. We also have research coming out that says brains that rely on AI to regularly do things for them are deteriorating. Okay.
I've been seeing some of those articles. Yes, it's kind of scary because we're coming quickly, very dependent upon it. And so yes, it's scary.
Very scary. As a researcher, so my dissertation research was on Black girls in after-school book clubs. How do
Mhm.
they form an identity as a writer and a reader as they're reading Black girl novels, right?
Oh, that's so fitting for you.
It is. I have my lane. And as I'm going through their composition books and I'm taking pictures of them and I'm coding the words that come up most frequently,
Mhm.
I'm finding out what the students mean when they say this word. It's discourse analysis, which is kind of a one person, very narrow, very small, human based way of thinking about how do I know that students are describing to me what their identity as a writer is like? How do I code the data? How do I make sure the themes are resonant with what the kids are saying? Having done discourse analysis for my dissertation research, AI is very hopped up discourse analysis based on huge libraries of text from people who haven't been paid for the use of their intellectual property. Let's start there.
Right.
And cooled down by huge amounts of energy output, right? That are affecting what kinds of communities first? Low income communities,
Of
marginalized
course.
communities.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions about deteriorating the environment quickly for a buck.
Mhm.
Won't be able to eat. Now, I'm definitely channeling my Fannie Lou Hamer because there's no nutritional value in a dollar. None. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I have to say that I have this kind of I'm balancing the two, and I say that because I am a fan of AI when and only when and if it is leveraged and used responsibly. But we're finding there's so many ways in which it's creating harm. And so part of what I've been crusading for is just generating awareness around what does ethical AI use look like? What is responsible AI? And what should organizations be thinking about? And even individual users, right? And so I think that conversation is really important. But the reason that I say it can be somewhat of a love hate relationship is because when it's done bad and it's creating harm, it sucks,
throw it
right?
all
But
away.
the power of it when it's done well, even when I think about how it could help bridge the gap of maybe the separation of particularly people on the margins who maybe have not had the luxury of some of the experiences and the resources right at their fingertips to be able to compete effectively in the marketplace for upward mobility, things of that nature, how it can maybe shorten that learning curve. Um, it still does not go without continuing to preach and crusade for ethical, responsible use. And I will tell you, there's some new dynamics that are surfacing, and you referenced it, which is how it's deteriorating our brains. Because are we relying too much on it? And so, yeah, I'm watching it, but I'm also making sure that I am, because I feel like, to be honest with you, I feel like it's not going anywhere. I feel like it's here to stay. And so it's how do we coexist with it while we're still trying to fight for justice and prevent harm.
I was just saying one thing that I've noticed with my executive coaching clients, when recruiters reach out with bots, it seems that they've been, especially on LinkedIn, it seems that they've been told to set up the workflow and then let it just forget about it, and it'll do
Oh no. Mm-mm.
such a bad
Yeah,
idea
that's
because
a setup for disaster,
set up for disaster, and in an employment market which already has these gaps in being able to secure employment, maintain employment, and get new employment, like you're I think you're putting barriers on top of barriers, in particular because a lot of folks are trying to make their resumes ATS friendly and using lots of keywords, and I'm thinking to myself, is this keywording helping us to be more authentic to what our experience has been? Or are we trying to shift our language to satisfy a model that doesn't have the context for understanding our experience?
Yeah, yeah, such great points that you raise, and yeah, and when you put that in context of the 306,000 Black women who are out of work right now because of the economy and the political climate, it's yeah, it makes it even more of an urgent need for us to make sure we're being thoughtful about it. Yeah. It's complex to say the least. But yeah, we definitely need to continue to unearth these challenges so that people, if nothing else, they are aware and they can govern themselves accordingly until we can figure out as a society, all the powers that be, how to put more guardrails in place that's going to help help ensure that this is really helpful and not harmful and that how we've seen it. So
And it can be so helpful, especially if you're talking about a super specific AI system and a language system that understands what is the jargon that is used in this specific area, this specific field. The value for me is in specificity because I teach my clients how to build the AI models that are going to help them specifically. Let's say we're looking for a position as a CEO as of a nonprofit that deals with housing. In order
yeah,
for us to build the bots that are going to be able to help you the most and give you information that and do research really quickly that you couldn't do on your own, right? We have to be able to make a very specific, narrow use case and then find the data that we want it to make a decision on. And that isn't something that is going to happen if you're using a large GPT system that's just pretty general. The work that
yeah,
folks find, the work that folks find most useful with general GPT things are, or if people want to use like DeepSeek or Claude or Chat GPT,
hmm,
those are really helpful for getting ideas. But the way
yeah,
I explain it to my undergrads is this. If I tell you happy birthday and I hand you a bowl of flour, butter, eggs, and sugar, you're going to look at me like I've lost my mind because something has been lost, right?
yeah, absolutely.
But if I say happy birthday and I give you a birthday cake or a cupcake, right? Gluten-free if that's your thing, then you're going to be much happier and we have much smoother communication. Like idea transmitted, we've been able
Yeah.
to receive the right idea and to communicate the message. But for my students, I always explain AI will give you ingredients. It's up to you to cook it. You have to be
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah, great analogy. You have to cook it. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. Context is so important. It's so nuanced too, and so we have to make sure that we know what we're getting and that we aren't just kind of accepting it as so, but we're really interrogating it,
yeah,
in a
and
way
it's a
to
different
yeah,
model. Check with
Yeah.
different models. If you
Yeah.
find that one model says one thing, check with two or three other different models, and then
Yeah.
use your computer and synthesize the information. This is what we
That's the
at the
information.
table want the kids to do. Synthesize it and figure out, how am I going to put my spin on it? What do I
Yeah.
want the cake to taste like? What do I want it to look like? You know, the food metaphors always work for teaching, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you on that. I do love the analogy of you may have the ingredients, but you still need to cook it. Yeah. There's still a part that you have to play. So yes. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the courses that you're teaching, specifically as it relates to African American authors. And so, how do you help students navigate the intersections of race, authorship, and power in these texts?
A lot of the work that I do is around critically thinking about these narratives. And so that's something that I taught to my sixth and seventh graders, that I teach the exact same way to the undergrads, and the exact same way I teach to the staff. Who is telling the story?
Mm-hmm.
Benefits the most from the story being told this way? Who benefits the least?
Mm-hmm.
Whose voice is present? Whose is absence? And what is the effect of the story being told from a different perspective?
Yeah.
So if we're thinking about, if you give a mouse a cookie, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We hear about this from the perspective of the mouse, okay? There is no one taking the perspective of how the cat feels about this mouse
Yeah.
getting all these cookies, getting all this support. What about the dog? There could be other
Right.
animals in this household seeing this go down, and what would their perspectives be?
Yeah.
I try to keep it light, keep it fun, but really keep it based in thinking critically about who would benefit from me believing this story as is, what could be left out of this story, right? And how does this story personally benefit or not benefit me? A lot of the work that I do with training attorneys is around this question of, what stories do people easily believe about me, and what stories do I easily believe about myself? What stories do people
Mm-hmm.
have a hard time believing about me, and what stories do I have a hard time believing about certain groups? It could be because I led the women's leadership program at America 250. And so we have a lot of thoughts about, how do we define leadership writ large, and how do we define leadership for women? Because I guarantee you, coming into a conference room or an executive boardroom and screaming, "I'm in charge" at the top of your lungs and banging your fists on the table, see, I see your face. I see your
Doesn't get you anywhere. Yeah.
right? That's not
That's
going.
nothing.
That's not coming across as a leader that you respect, and that's not coming across as a leader that respects you. So when we think
Yeah.
about the reciprocity of it, it's real important to help people understand reciprocity and respect is a two-way street.
It
It's
is.
whether you're dealing with a narrative, or whether you're dealing with another person or a situation or a news story. Because the thing that's been so, I mean, you mentioned those deportations. Kilmer Abrego is from Maryland. He was deported from Maryland. And it's like, okay, so we don't know that these charges against him, at this point, those are allegations. What we do know
Yeah.
is that you removed somebody from the country and put them in a prison overseas.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Who
Hits
benefits from
home.
the idea, right? Who benefits from the idea that this man is a smuggler? We don't have any
Hmm.
evidence of that. We don't have any evidence in the narrative that this man has smuggled anything. And
Hmm.
you better believe, if your elected officials are going overseas to see you in prison, are you serious right now? Are you serious? There's no evidence that this person has committed a crime, so why should you believe it? Healthy skepticism is very important to a critically thinking mind.
Yeah, that is a mouthful right there. We have to interrogate things that we encounter, things that we hear, instead of just accepting it as so, or just, being flippant about it. The curiosity is so critical in times like this, because sometimes it just takes asking questions for people to then kind of be forced to a place of having to reckon with, well, what have we done? Why did we do it? And be able to speak to that. I love the practicality and the simplicity in which you talk about how in which, no matter the age group, you kind of bring, this full circle. What stories are being told that we believe? I mean, I love that questioning, and I think that it's a way to open our eyes again to the very topic that we're addressing, are we critically thinking, or are we just kind of accepting things as so? And I think that's really important. So we're getting close to time. So I have about two more questions before I'll let you kind of close out in a way that feels good for you, and addressing maybe something that I haven't asked you about today. But we've talked a good bit about literature and how it finds its way, certainly at the center of the work that you do. But it also serves as a tool for equity and for healing and even resistance. And so, talk to us about how you have brought that full circle into your practice, using literature as a way for equity, healing, and resistance.
I think there's a lot of just from a practical teacher's perspective, there are a lot of narratives that I like for students to have. And if you can put literature in conversation so that you have a lot of different perspectives in the conversation, students are more apt to understand that, wait a minute, I can only see from where I'm standing, and there's
Yeah.
no way I can have a full perspective without participating with everyone else, right? Because a lot of the work that we do, especially when we're reading African American literature, is understanding, how does Phyllis Wheatley feel about being identified as a Christian? When we're thinking
Yeah.
about her religious identity, is that connected to her gender identity? And what do we do about the fact that she died in poverty?
Hmm.
She
Hmm.
did this groundbreaking work, even though her contributions were huge, monumental, right? Shifted the framework in terms of what people think Black women writers are capable of, right? She was not compensated, and she was not receiving even the kudos, even the esteem of the establishment, the way that a person from a different social location could have been, right? So if we change things around, and if we think about what is it like to write about womanhood from the perspective of an Emily Bronte, right? We can talk about Elizabeth Cady Stanton. We can put these women in conversation, metaphorically. I think the class requires a lot of imagination, but metaphorically, we can put these folks in conversation to understand. So if we know that these people have not been given their just due, how do we do that today? And how do we go back and correct the narrative? Because the story isn't over. It's continued. If you and I are talking about it, it's still alive.
Right.
And we're
Right.
these issues coming up again today. So a lot of it has to do with making sure that students are empowered to add to the narrative when they hear it. Because I'm one of those people, I like conversation. I don't like a ton of debate because people get very feisty and spicy, and I have to remind folks, this isn't the internet, okay? No keyboard
Um,
warriors in here. If you can't come from respect, responsibility, and reciprocity, I don't want it. You got to find somewhere else to be,
I
because
like it.
we are, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the work that I think students do around resistance, one of my funnest days ever at Baltimore City Schools, oh my gosh. One of my funnest days ever was out at the farm, and it was Black History Month. They have a Black Foodways conference
Uh-huh.
every year, which is really fun.
Uh-huh.
And I was leading the workshop on Fannie Lou Hamer, and
Yep.
it was called Jammin' for Justice. And so
Okay.
we we read a little bit of her work. We talked about her life. We talked about her contributions, and really thinking about it as we're talking about this, right? Me and my partner, we are making sure that the students know food preservation and access to food is part of your political identity and your political ability. One of the most famous things or quotes that we discussed was, it's really hard to oppress somebody who knows where their next meal is coming from, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
okay, but is that true today? Is it true today? Okay. How many people are recovering from traumatic workplace experiences
Yeah,
because they needed to have the money for food, right?
absolutely. Yeah, so
So
true.
those historical narratives are still with us, and they're still helping us to figure out how we're going to combat this moment where food insecurity could become a thing, right? Hopefully the students were empowered to know that the stories of how somebody else survived becomes a story in your toolkit of how you can survive. Even if making strawberry jam won't feed you forever, it will make the strawberries that you have last a little bit longer.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yes. And I think that one of the takeaways for me is that when you were talking about adding to the narratives, it really is true that stories never end, because we're constantly kind of reinventing them, retelling them, adding to them, pontificating on what we think about them once we process them. And yes. And so I love that. So we're out of time, but Dr. Carleen, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I want to thank this community for showing up and for being a part of our podcast community. We don't take it lightly when you all show up week after week during this hour to be a part of our conversation. And I want to give you an opportunity to close this out in a way that feels appropriate. So, what's next for you? Is there something that you have not socialized that you really would love for this community to know?
Definitely. So I've decided after a bunch of my clients have been after me for about 6 months now to start a newsletter. I'm launching one on LinkedIn. It's called Holy Leading, and it's about making sure that you're bringing your whole self to leadership. You're thinking about
Ah,
authenticity. At Acoma, we always say that your vision shows you your values that lead to your victory. So really kind of thinking about how to lead from an authentic place and something that feels in a way that feels right to you. So that'll be coming out first week of July.
First week of July, Holy Leading. I love the name. I love the concept. And I hope that this community will definitely support. We're going to share your LinkedIn information into the chat so that those who are not already connected to you can get connected to you. And thank you again just for your time today. Wishing you the best, and thank you for your leadership and being a model of so many things that we all need to kind of take heed to. And I really have enjoyed our dialogue. And so hope you all have enjoyed the conversation today. If you found this useful, please share this out with those who are in your network. And we hope to see you again next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations Podcast. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye bye.